everybody. Welcome to the Serene View. My name is Serene, and today I have with me Tiffany. Yes, so today we're going to have a constructive argument. Now, if you have never heard of a constructive argument, it's basically a healthy way to disagree. So one of the things I kind of find in the world nowadays is that we are all living in these echo chambers where we only hear our own views or views similar to ours, and that causes the world to polarize. So I think that with every issue, there should be multiple viewpoints and multiple views that are equally valid. So I'm starting constructive argument to try and bring all of these views up to light. And today I have with me, I'm so excited, one of the most fiery, passionate human beings I have ever met. Right? I think a lot of us think, women should be nice, caring, and so on. Meet the woman who will, remove all these bad stereotypes about women. Yes. So today I'm very pleased to have Tiffany Zamot with me, who is an empathetic human being, a public speaker, as well as a team motivator. Tiffany, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you so much, Serene. I've been cultivating who and what I am. And so, and what it is that I share with others. And I feel like I help build bridges to understanding. I help turn chaos into calm by helping move people through those behavioral changes. I feel like that's where it gets a little tough, is actually creating the habits and building up the system in order to facilitate actual change movement within ecosystems. So I'm so glad to be here with you, Serene. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm excited for what we dive into here.
Hi. So, Mohammed is also saying hi. Hi. Musin said hi as well. Hi. And today, what are we going to talk about? So this topic came from Tiffany, who wrote an article about herself being Dilbert. So she wrote, she thinks she's Dilbert. And the thing is that I think I'm Dilbert. I think she's not Dilbert. So today we're going to argue about who's Dilbert. No, just kidding. Today we're going to argue about, does management actually care? If any of you have no idea what is Dilbert, please go and Google it up. www.dilbert.com. It's one of the joys of life. And really what we are talking about is, are you like Dilbert? Do you believe that management doesn't care about human beings? They care about their own bottom line? Or do you think that, people care? They care a lot. So let us know. What do you think? So, Tiffany, do you want to start it off?
Yeah, sure. So actually, I'm so glad we're starting here with Dilbert, because when I wrote the article, I was like, Dilbert, I had spoken with Dr. Richard Clayton, who is a behavioral scientist. If I were to describe him, he is a unique human being that just shares so many good vibes with so many people, because he's able to usher in good change in such a systemic and holistic way. And so, yeah, we can do that. And so he introduced me to this thing called the Dilbert principle. And he goes, what did you think the comic strip was based around? And so in the discussion with Serene over the week, actually, Jeff Marlowe said, and who is a culture catalyst, I would say. That's probably not the best way to describe him either, but he was on a couple of weeks ago, so please tune into that. He shared that, hey, Tiffany, you're not Dilbert. Stop. You are Alice. And so I went down the Dilbert.com rabbit hole, clicked on Alice, and he mentioned something about the fist of death. And so... I see a lot of that in me, right? So there's this caring and compassionate side, and then there's also this switch ability, and which I think is pretty interesting, because sometimes we get into this thought pattern that leaders have to be nice. leaders have to be nice to make change, and maybe that's a farce. Why do leaders have to be nice? What is it that really motivates and drives people to care? I'd love to know what you think, Serene.
This has been my greatest, the whole of 2020, right? This is the one phrase that people say the most to me. You're on mute. Okay, but yes. I'm going to share two things. One is the Fist of Death, which you have mentioned before. And this is the Fist of Death from Alice. So for those of you who have no idea where it is, Dilbert.com, go and Google Fist of Death. And secondly, I'm going to invite a guest to stage, Isaac, who is joining us. Hello, Isaac.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Hey, yes. So are you for or against management? Do you think management cares?
Yes. I mean, management is people just like everyone else. And I think that there is no way for management to not care. So yeah, I mean, I'm definitely trying to listen to what everyone is saying and kind of absorb where we are going along. But yes, absolutely. I mean, I think that the first thing you have to recognize is that, in an area where there tends to be a lot of habits that are formed, that everyone involved in these habits is still a person.
Yeah, I like where you're going there with that, because actually, you and I spoke before, Isaac, and I like what you say about this all being tied into relatability, how people relate to others. And I feel like when we get sucked into a focus, like a one core thing, that tends to polarize how we present ourselves, because if it's all about perception management and showing up in the way to get people to kind of follow along with what your core desires are. So sometimes you may be money driven. Sometimes your core focus is on more society driven initiatives. And I think that ultimately plays a part in who you project yourself as. What do you think?
Well, I don't think so. I'm going to say this. I feel that, I feel that many managers are people outside of the organization, and then they go to work and they become these monsters. I won't say monsters. They become these cogs in the machine, where they look at you and you are a number, you are a statistic, a hand, I don't know, whatever, an underling with which to order around, right? And actually, Sushi has said that individuals care. Management collectively implements policies that are supposed to be executed in a fashion that says we care, but for who exactly is anyone's guess. And actually, this is what I believe. I mean, I think she's right. What do you guys think?
So I guess here is the question that I would push out. You get these people who are people at home, and then they come to work and they become cogs in the machine. And I'm not going to say that that is not something that I'm trying to phrase up my words as carefully as I can here, just to make sure it's as clear as possible. Well, actually, no, I'll give you an example. I work in the gaming industry, and I know a lot of people in the gaming industry who are management. The way that it's structured tends to be you have lead designers who run teams. And me specifically, but also a lot of the people that I know and work with, we very much care. And to give you a very specific reason as to why we care, that relates to both work and on a personal level, is I hire out people who are creatively diverse. And I do so because I want to make sure that I am, especially in the narrative team, I am bringing people in with a variety of situations, with a variety of backgrounds. And by doing so, I'm bringing in people who they themselves have experienced different stories. By bringing in these different backgrounds and stories, I have allowed my team to have the largest collection of emotions and stories that I can then translate into fiction and put into my game. And so by doing this, this I am ensuring that I am caring because these are emotions that people are feeling that need to be translated into the game. And B, I am wanting to care because I am getting to hear all of these experiences and these personal notes. And this is only, one industry, but really anything creative can have that, can be brought to the table. You have actors who ad-lib lines and stuff like that. So there's definitely quite a bit of specifically in the creative industry, where a lot of people do care, because a lot of people bring stuff to the table that tends to be very team structured, even though the organization there is designed to keep things running in a particular order for maximum efficiency.
So can I say this, that you only care because it helps the work to be achieved better, right? I mean, you care to get their stories so that those stories can be put into your work. So ultimately, I would say that there is a purpose for the caring. Would that be true? So I care for my people so that I can get my work done better. Is that how you would define it?
So I would sit back and I would say that, and this is where I'm trying to be careful, because these are people who I work with for 8 hours a day, people whose personal stories I learn and I listen to. So do I hire specifically people who are different than me in order to make sure that I am maximizing the potential of my product through the creativity? Yes, absolutely.
I think you said something really interesting there too, because I think a lot of the counter argument is around being driven by metrics. Okay, so and I think a lot of that is the problem. So when you think about what is the one main thing from a stakeholder, or from an internal stakeholder perspective, right? Let's say top level management. I feel like it's, well, how do we run a sustainable business if we are operating from a lens where I need to know the data? The problem is, what if what the OKRs and the KPIs is producing bad data? And then where do you go from there if you realize that the systems that are in place currently just aren't working? Then it comes down to this care, like this desire to, like, what are you driven by? Are you driven by nailing your people? That's probably a bad way to put it, but are you essentially going to drive down on your people, for instance, because these things, they're great, but they screw me up a little. So just FYI, right? What is this scene? This is my very first live stream, so whoops. Don't be distracted by the things on the screen.
Yes, I was just going to put up the health catalyst, because I think that was your article that you posted that made the same point, right? Yep. I mean, what are we measuring here, right? Firstly, I would say, in the creative industry, perhaps you may need this because people need to bring, you need to be emotionally healthy to be very creative. Perhaps that's my understanding as an outsider. But in a lot of the industries, right, the way that you're being measured, sales targets, for example, the productivity, things like that, they're very hardcore matrices. And I really don't care almost what is your personal story, because it doesn't impact work in any way. And actually, honestly, like if I were working for you, Isaac, I will be very wary of telling you any of my stories because I don't know whether I want, them to be translated into games and broadcast around the world, right? So I think then there is this idea that, oh my gosh, management is evil, right? They're just talking to me to get my personal story, to get better games, right? To get the product out.
Yeah. So, okay. Just to make it clear, and this is coming from the creative side, one of the things that I say is that creativity is essentially reality that has been wrapped up, or I'm sorry, my apologies. Art is an emotion that has been wrapped up to hand it to the audience. So I am not directly taking your story and saying, hey, guess what? This person did blah, 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 blah. I am sitting back and saying, okay, how did you feel in this situation? Okay, you're not the only one who has felt this in this situation. So we're going to take your emotions and we're going to share them in a new story. So it's not exactly something that's being directly translated. And so for you to come work for me, and this is something that, I have talked about with Tiffany before, is that there are essentially 4 parts for the way that the brain works. And each of these 4 parts tends to have different motivations behind it. So the first one is knowledge. These are people who use the knowledge section of their brain more than any other section tend to be very facts and data driven. I am not even going to, and this is where you're going to get a lot of your information for what you're talking about. These are people who are going to be, they are going to follow patterns to a very specific degree. Then you have people who are very intelligence driven. They're the people who take these facts and they add them together to get new data. And these are people who are likely as well to follow a very similar path. They are the people who tend to develop, especially at restaurants, a lot of the systems used to maximize the efficiency of their employees. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm not going to pretend to say that, there aren't systems set up designed to maximize efficiency without any type of personal connection, because that is absolutely the case. In fact, I would say that we don't even have to talk about work. There's a lot of systems in place in life that do something very similar. However, the other 2 parts of your brain are the imagination, which is the function that really does lead to a semblance of creativity by being able to take an emotion and understand its core process so that you can translate it into fiction. And then the relational side, which is that social side. And just knowing that those other 2 groups exist out there, the imagination and the relational side, it does kind of indicate for me that this stuff is, that there are people out there who do care. And this is where I'm trying to be careful, because I'm trying to specify the fact that there are people out there who do care, and I'm trying to tie it back into work. So there are people who care about other people's stories, and it is there to help them. But I would say, and this is especially coming from the creative side, that is where you are able to have people come in and be passionate about their work because they relate to their work by bringing their own stories to the table. And so there is a passionate social connection with their work. But at the same time, I'm a very social person. And so right. I definitely...
yeah. Can you... Okay, you're kind of breaking up. I'm not sure if Tiffany also hears that. At least for me, I wanted to say this, right? I mean, if you're going to say there are some people who care, look, we can make this argument all the time. There are some people who care, there are managers who care, and so on and so forth. When we say does management care, I think it's more really what we're talking about is as a whole, as in general. And actually, I send this out to most of my platforms, okay, all of the people. I want to know from my audiences, right? I mean, whose side do you stand on? Do you feel that management cares in general? Okay, like if I talk about management in general, not just the 1 or 2 leaders or perhaps in certain very specialized industry that cares, but in general, do you feel management cares? And
what do you mean cares?
Like, do they care about their people, or is it more like, I'm looking at you as you are a means to an end, you're a means to getting the work done, or do I
how
actually
many
care of
people
you
do
as a human
they
being?
care about? Because you've got a CEO who runs multiple different franchises. They
Yes.
cannot know about every single one of the lowest level employees. So what qualifies as them caring?
Oh, I love that.
I think,
and I also think another thing is like what we're talking about is the systems that live within an ecosystem. That's what we're talking about. And I feel like so often the discussion is so linear, right? It's so one-sided, and so it brings to mind, like, the Indian, is it a proverb? I'm not sure, but it's like the idea of like the blind people feeling around different parts of a large a large animal, like an elephant, and coming to the other side with different stories. And I think that's what you're talking about, Isaac. It's like you're saying bring lived experience to the table, and that allows for shared experiences. So this is actually a really powerful thing and a really powerful discussion when the discussion is on like how to generate more revenue from a revenue generating perspective. Sure, it's like how, instead of what's driving, how do we make our people work more efficiently and harder and faster and work from home or whatever.
Yes.
I like this.
I was going to say that Jeff, since you're talking about systems, Jeff, one of the guys who interviewed about systems, he said that it's more subtle than just do they care or don't they care. It's I care about you, so you should do what I say. And as a parent, I will admit that I do fall into this. And is the system set up so that that's the way it should be? That's the way it is.
And what are we rewarding? Like, are we rewarding people to fail? Because seriously, I feel like a lot of the discussion now is centered on how much harder can you work? What more can you produce in a shorter amount of hours? And I feel like if we're all driven by widgets, then we're never going to get to the point where we can actually do the deep work to create new ways of thinking, because what we're talking about is changing a management perspective, a deeply held management and leadership perspective. And I feel like that's part of the issue here.
And I think a big question that I would ask is really to make sure that this type of stuff is defined, right? I mean, if you were to look at any relationship, even not just within the workplace, but outside the workplace, you have an entire aspect of parent to kid. You have, one person to spouse, one person to friend. And in a way, there's always some level of reason and motivation as to why you establish a relationship. The reason is usually brought back into relatability, someone who's able to understand someone else. And this could be on a very, very deep level, or it could be something as simple as I play basketball, you play basketball, great, let's play basketball together. So, and there is benefits into having a friend on the basketball court who you're able to get along with so that you can hang out with them afterwards. So, I mean, that is the question, is what exactly do you mean in terms of caring for the management side?
So, okay, talk about the healthcare industry. I know, Serena, is there something that you would like to say?
Yes, I will send it out to you, the healthcare industry. I was just going to say this, right? That I think in any work environment, we do have some relationship with people, right? I mean, a lot of times there are lots of people who hate their bosses, but I'm sure there's equal amount of people who get along and like their bosses in general. But when it comes to decision making, especially in an organization, I don't really feel that they prioritize people. So the impact that it makes on humans are often one of the last considerations that there is. I mean, I had a discussion with Jeff, I think 2 weeks back, and he says that the decision making is all the sense making decision making is all made on the top, and then it's basically just handed over to you, right, as the person below, in the lower down in the organizational hierarchy. This is it. Do this. Go do what I tell you to do. And whether or not it makes sense, whether or not it kills you, like, suck it up. It's work, right? I think Dilbert has this comment that says if it's enjoyable, it's not work. If you're enjoying it, you're obviously not working hard enough.
Okay,
and that's
so
kind of the feeling that I get. Go on, sorry.
So I
Tiffany.
feel like we're all over the place here. I don't know if you guys feel that way too. So I wanna summarize a little bit just everything that we've covered. Okay, so we've talked about like the differences between caring and not caring. And really just if people do. And I think that's a really weak argument. So then we talked a little bit about metrics, which is based on quantity, in my opinion, and measures, which are related to quality. And so from a healthcare industry perspective, and the only reason I bring this up is because it's the relevant data that I found supporting, dynamic systems almost. And so the first is operations processes. And so operations processes are the things that when you think of metrics, right? And then balance is how does everything go together well? And then finally, how does it all mesh, right? What's the stickiness that kind of sticks it all together and makes everything kind of work? And then the final thing is process measures. And so I really like process measures because instead of being driven by, it's almost, to me, it's almost like a conversation, process measures. And I think that's what's missing from a lot of the dialogues. Something interesting I heard recently by a chick named Mel. She said she took an executive position and she said, yeah, I don't let my people see the metrics because I feel like they're not ready for it. And I think that's an interesting place to begin a conversation. It's like, what else is there besides data, which may be bad data? And let's start from a new place. But here's the thing, that takes time. It takes, as you know, as we know, because it's a felt experience, we live in a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. And I would say to you, Isaac, there's a blanket statement here about hating the boss. And I would argue that, is it actually hating the boss, or is it hating the organizational structure, or is it hating the work? And then finally, why do you hate that aspect? And so something that I've been really interested in is like this strengths-based psychology thing. And so I'm going to stop there for a moment and let you interject, Isaac, if you'd like. Otherwise, I'll just keep rambling.
Well, I mean, and this is really where I'm trying to maintain certain definitions in order to be as clear as I can with my answers. And I got into the conversation a little bit late, so that was my bad. But part of the issue that I'm having are with these blanket statements, because there are a lot of questions that come with this. So question number one is, how big are these companies? How small are these companies? Mm-hmm. Because, for example, there is a game company out there called ID Software, and they, in their infancy, what they used to do was they would pay their employees based on need, because they wanted to make sure the company got off the ground, so they paid their employees to keep them around. And it's currently owned by a larger company, who the head of that company is not as concerned with the person bringing coffee to someone in an office very far away. And so that's really where I've tried to set up the definitions for these arguments, because there's so much wiggle room to debate on this type of stuff. So diving into what you were saying, Tiffany, about the 4 quadrants, is that you do have these people who live and work based on their personalities that are developed by these strengths, these 4 different aspects of the brain where they are developed. And there are a lot of people out there who are relational people. It is literally programmed in for them, and it's not, people don't just run off of one of these. They often have 2 that are very strong and 2 that are weaker. but there are a lot of people who run off of this relational one for work and for personal life. There's some people who don't. You get some people who don't want to talk to anyone but their spouse, or their kids or their close personal friend, and don't want anything to do with anyone at work. That definitely exists. But there's also a lot of people who are relational, and there's people in management who have to do the best with which they can within the work environment to keep the company alive, because if the company doesn't make enough, a lot of people lose their jobs. So there are definitely executive decisions to be made, but sometimes that's just because of the way that the system works, and that has nothing to do with the people who are social, who do feel bad when someone has to be let go or a decision has to be made, against what would be the interest of an employee. But that isn't necessarily the management's fault.
What do you got, Serene?
Well, I don't know. I was going to say that, I think this company has to survive excuse is something that I've heard a lot of, right? It's like, okay, we're making this tough decision because the company has to survive. Now, I don't have a problem with the company surviving. But my question is it necessary sometimes to almost, make it hard for the people in order for the company to survive? So a lot of the decisions that are being made are sometimes, I don't know what to say except arbitrarily cruel. Okay, so I'll give you a simple example, right? The open plan office, right? Okay, we are all going to do away with cubicles. Now, if you've ever met an introvert, they will tell you that it's the worst possible working environment. If you need to do deep work, you need concentration, that is the worst possible working environment. But management has decided for some reason that this is very good for us and so on and so forth, and we do away with it. So there's a lot of these decisions that are being made that make me wonder, do you have the most basic consideration for the people? And yes, it's obviously there are tough decisions that need to be made, and sometimes you have to let people go and so on. I have been let go by an organization before in such a nice way that I continue to want to work for them. So it really isn't what you do so much as I think how you do it.
Yeah, well, that is a question that I think I would ask, is why did they get rid of the cubicles, right? Did letting go of the cubicles maximize the efficiency? Okay, well, if it maximized the efficiency, is it because the majority of the people were extroverts and they needed that level of social interaction? They needed those barriers removed so that they are, and I say extroverts, maybe these are people with a higher level imagination. So these are the majority of the people working for this company had a harder time focusing with the cubicles intact because they weren't able to look around, view their surroundings, and get a level of inspiration for their work in any company with having those white walls put up around them. So maybe the company was trying to work for a particular group that happens to be a majority, and they were caring about their employees in doing such a thing. But you kind of have a choice, serve one group of people or the other, both employees, both at the same level, but they couldn't do much. So that is a big question for me, is how is that not caring about the opposite group who does function better without the cubicles?
Okay, so here's what I think. Hey, Jennican.
Yes.
So I have a question, right? So Serene, you actually brought it up and you said, people have to make a decision, X decision to survive. And before I even read Jennican's comment, right? I'm going to make my point.
I was going to say the same thing, right? So anyway, go on.
Yeah, so here's the deal. Make a decision to survive. And I think there's a totally other side of the coin that we're not even considering. What about creating the conditions to thrive? What about that? It's like, that's the side that it's like we're operating inside of these known paradigms that have worked for us before within the last 100, 150 years. I don't know, however long, right? These are the paradigms that have served us well. But it's like everybody knows the world around us is changing. Everything is just becoming more uncertain. I feel like in a general sense, a lot of people feel misunderstood. I feel like because there is this groupthink mentality, people camp themselves in opposite polar ends of each other. And because they value certain things about that item, instead of having a discussion, Janikin, and coming up with this beautiful third space, for instance, it's like, why does there have to be this tension between the two polar opposite, strongly held virtues, right? These paradigms that people live in. It's like, maybe we have to have a discussion outside of that. And Jenikin, thank you for jumping in. I'm so glad that this is where the conversation is going. What do you got to say?
Well, I mean, she says that maybe companies keep ending up having to make hard decisions because they keep creating the conditions which lead them to hard decisions. And actually, as you have mentioned earlier on, she did made a comment, in our past couple of days and say that why does it have to be an either or, right? Why does it have to be care for your people or achieve operational excellence? Why can't it be both? I kind of hear my voice breaking up. Am I breaking up? No? Okay, good.
No, you're good.
All right, yes. So, I mean, what do you want to say about that?
In terms of it being both productive for the company as well as for the individual?
No, I think it's, is it a system that is driving them, like what Tiffany has said, a paradigm where we are forced to make hard decisions because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like we feel that, we should be in that situation, and therefore that's where we end up being.
I mean, I would definitely say that people take on patterns. The world takes on patterns. Life tends to be very, cyclical. Things have a tendency to repeat themselves. Habits tend to be formed. So I would say that just in life, there are definitely situations that people will find themselves in because there are certain actions that have been repeated. I mean, just take economics, right? Economics is a system designed to allow people in different fields to be able to create an exchange of goods without there being too many issues. So I can raise a cow and turn that cow into meat and sell the meat without having to feel like I have to go and give my cow to Mark Zuckerberg in order to get on my Facebook page. This currency system allows for an exchange of goods, and it's designed, and I would say that a lot of systems are designed to ensure that people are being taken care of. But over time, these systems, there are holes in the systems. There is no perfect system, and there are definitely people out there who exploit these systems, but there's also a lot of people who try and do as much good as possible with these systems. So yeah, I would say that the entire goal of every system is really to maximize the effectiveness of everyone. And this is not just a work thing, it's something that we see all through life. So I guess the question that I would ask for clarification purpose is that I would almost say that all decisions are made to increase that efficiency. So what exactly is it that makes it to where these things tend to fall apart around the employees?
I think that's a good question. I mean, does anybody want to jump in on this among the people that are hearing this? Like, come in and tell us, what do you think is breaking this system down in such a way that, and the employees are suffering? Yes, sorry, Tiffany, you want to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah, so this whole conversation brings me back to what is the system itself built on? And so I think about, I've been having conversations surrounding like ancient wisdom recently. And I'm just wondering, like, what came before the barter system? Like how did tribes effectively live without there being an exchange of some sort? I think that would be interesting to explore philosophically, maybe how to bring some of those positive deviance, if you will. How do you bring some of those positive deviants into the forefront that we can ideate over as a community, as a society at large, to really create a system that's maybe devoid of penalization, or a system that is fueled of collaborative efforts.
And
maybe, yeah, go ahead.
We have the old tale of the commons, right? You have this land given out to the common folk, and it's land that, as a community, they have to manage. But the problem is that these people, they become rather selfish. And so one of the things that people do is, person A puts out a cow out to graze. Person B puts out a cow out to graze. Well, then person B goes out and buys another cow, and so they put their cow out to graze. Well, now all of a sudden, person A is like, well, they're putting out more cows to graze, so I should put out more cows to graze. And so they start competing with each other until eventually the land is eaten up and destroyed. It has been a long time since I've heard that tale, so I'm sure that I butchered it quite a bit. But, and this really does come back to something that Serene said earlier, is that she doesn't necessarily want to work for me. She doesn't want to come and tell her story to me. And I find that interesting, because what it comes down to is that people in the Tale of the Commons did not communicate. They could have communicated, and they could have run this common ground, this common land together, if they had chosen to communicate and work together. But instead, they chose to, not thinking about anybody else, just saying, oh, well, now there are 2 cows out on land, so now I should put 2 cows on land. They weren't thinking about why there were 2 cows on land. They weren't thinking about the other person. They weren't thinking about what would happen to the land. They were only thinking about themselves. And so, not to say that community-based systems are bad, but when there is no communication, and Serene, you said this earlier, that you would not be interested in communicating with me your own story. So therefore, I can't necessarily help you. So I would say that these systems are created to develop a way for the metrics to go and develop the maximum efficiency with data-driven stuff when communication has a tendency to break down. You're muted.
Yes. That's what I was just telling you, because there was a bit of a sound, so I thought I would mute myself, and I was saying, I hope I remember to unmute. But anyway, okay. So I guess what you are saying really is that a lot of these systems were created, the matrices were created to substitute communication. And I think with work organizations becoming larger and larger, it's sometimes a little bit difficult to get the communication out to everyone. I think just now we were talking about, organizational size, right? If they are smaller, I think it's easier because I see you regularly to kind of care for you as a human being. As organizations get quite big, you're very far removed from me, and you become converted to a statistic on my screen, right? I have 100 employees in X country and so on. So when you say that communication, like, what level, how should we communicate, especially when it's work and we're all pressed for time, there's all these other stuff that goes on at work, right?
Yeah, well, that is, we don't even have to even make it that big. I guess there are 2 points I would point out, and this is kind of where I have been carefully listening and trying to communicate my words properly, is that if you have a system, if your argument is that companies don't care, but that communication is important for caring, and big companies have a harder time communicating because of their size, does that mean that we're taking small companies out of the argument? Does that mean that it's just big companies don't care? Or are we, because the big companies still are organized in such a structure where communication does tend to be open. Now, that obviously makes things more challenging because people are promoted based off of how well they do, not based off of how well they communicate. And so, just because they're set up to communicate does not mean that they do an effective job, but it does kind of go back to the original question of, what are we talking about? Are we just saying that big companies don't look after their employees? Are we just saying the CEOs don't look after the people at the very, very bottom? How are we phrasing this debate in such a term? Because again, running a small company, people care because that communication is there. So does that mean that you make that face, but I know.
I was just disagree with you. I've been in many small companies where the boss doesn't care. So that's why there's that. You sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
And in no way am I saying that, there aren't small companies with bosses who don't care, any more that you're saying that that there's companies with bosses who do care. But I would sit back and I'm still trying to define the terms of engagement because I don't know.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Tiffany, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, first of all, I feel like this is the Wild West of live streaming. There is no terms. That's why the conversation is so messy. And that is actually really important that you address that, Isaac, because, yeah, this conversation is going in a bunch of places and we're not able to get to common ground because we're all singing from different sheets of the same music, which is why in big organizations, we can't just talk about creating one map or one blanket, end all be all KPI, OKR, system in order to fix different problems and apply it, across the board from the masses, because every company, every organization is an ecosystem in itself. And I like what you said earlier, Isaac, about bringing in people with diverse perspectives or diverse lived experiences, so they're able to share their lived their perspectives. And I think that's important because the internal stakeholders are essentially a direct reflection, at least if you do like really deep, diverse hiring. And this is like, how you are, like, as different from your skin, but how you are cognitively, right? That's a super important part of that. And so I feel like, number one, the terms are not defined almost intentionally because, I'm kind of interested in the exploration phase because we're not looking to get to any hard answers. And I think that's a reason why we're going to leave this dialogue so open and contextual, not to get to solutions because there is no right solution, right? It's all so nuanced. So, but the main topic is if everyone cares, right? If we can all agree from a general sense, everybody cares. And I love what you said earlier, Isaac, about care and relatability, right? Because it's like, what if you have a sense of love for your people, a sense of love for what you're doing, you show up intentionally, right? This comes from like knowing yourself and knowing who around you share the same virtues. Guys are able to walk hand in hand almost with like shared virtues, right? Shared values. And I think all of that's super important. And so as you develop these organizations, it is about a misalignment in communication, right? We're not doing enough to show up and share our perspectives. And we can't just say, so here's what I say. Just throw what we have. Just throw it in the freaking garbage. Just throw it away. Because really what we need to just do is just, in many cases, just start over. Just start over.
I was just going to say that Janakin agrees with you because she's talking about destructive rules of engagement, which actually strengthen and create negative feedback loops. Like exactly what you said, we should just throw it out. Because we fight to win, we win to survive, which creates competitive behaviors that breaks down trust and messes the productivity, and which we react to by driving harder for the win. And actually, I see this happening at the workplace. So is that what you're saying, that we are totally, completely, operating from the wrong paradigm?
Well, I would sit back and I keep the term rules of engagement, and I keep the term rules of engagement because I want to. This is a debate that I feel like I want to win or be proven wrong on. I'm not here to win, but I want to make sure that the rules are defined so that there is a winner. And the reason why I want there to be a winner, whether it's me or not, is because by defining a winner, we now have identified a problem. which we can identify a solution. By the fact that this is a debate that we have not defined these terms, we now have such a wide berth that, and I am enjoying myself. This is fun for me, which I think really just emphasizes the fact that I'm a nerd, right? I mean, who else is just sitting back and enjoying their mornings chatting about stuff that has nothing to do with them? But it doesn't have anything to do with me, but I'm still here up at an hour that I normally wouldn't be at, because I want to be here. I want to be able to sit back and I want to find solutions. And so I am competing with you guys. I don't necessarily feel this desire to win, but I do feel the desire to compete, because by somebody winning, it doesn't have to be me, but by somebody winning, we're able to define, we're able to have definitions that lead to a truth, that lead to a solution. I think that's the biggest issue. We've talked about communication, and we're not getting anywhere in this conversation because we don't have the communication necessary to pull this off. I feel like for you, Serene, this is very personal, and I feel like I have a very different personal atmosphere. And I think that for me, breaking down the rules of engagement are for me to sit back and say, I don't necessarily have the same issues that you're having, but I also don't necessarily work in the same environment. So by defining these terms, we can sit back and say, okay, well, we're talking about this. Okay, well, now that we've defined this, maybe we can find solutions that work in this particular field better.
All right, Serene, you take over.
No, I was going to say that A, is not personal. I think Tiffany knows that I just kind of like arguing with people, and I like going, like, whatever you're saying. Look, I wouldn't start a constructive argument movement if I don't like arguing, right? So I do like doing it. And yes, I'm enjoying myself. I do enjoy that different perspective is coming out. I think one of the whole point of this discussion is, what are the different perspectives that we are not looking at when we say management hate? We hate management. Management hates us. You know, what are all the different things that we didn't think about? Right? Did we think about the size? Did we think about the type of people? Did we think about whether there was any communication? So I enjoy that all of these, maybe what you think of as messy stuff, are coming out, and whether it is the system that is driving people to be like that, the rules of engagement, for example. In terms of whether or not there's a winner. I will honestly say that put it this way, okay? I mean, if I say about management, or like hating your boss, or no, management doesn't care about us, and so on, I find that there's a great resonance in the market. I have great resonance in people, and one of the reasons why Dilbert is so successful. But I wonder if that is, I think I said this to Tiffany earlier, whether there's a collective kind of, almost a collective, indoctrination, right? We expect work to be unpleasant. We expect management to be unpleasant. A little bit like, many years ago, people expect the earth to be flat, and everybody knew that the earth was flat, right? So I was wondering whether it's that, or whether it is true that there's a lot of behavior that management is putting out that causes people to collectively perceive management as kind of evil, right? Well, so even people who kind of say, my boss is good, will say, when you say management evil, they will say, oh, but yeah, my boss is good, but, it's almost as though they are the exception, right? I don't know.
So it's actually kind of funny to think about that, the way that it's very funny to think about your question, because it's almost ironic. So take the public education system, right? Everyone knows that it is garbage. Everyone knows that it is not the best benefit. But I talk to a lot of people who are doing this unschooling program. And it's not necessarily a program that I support, because what you're doing is that you are, and this is mostly for someone like me, because there are people out there who do unschooling and do it very well. However, that helps them as individuals, but it doesn't help change the group setting of a public school education system, because they are completely trying to drop everything from the public education system. Whereas we have this system there in place because it does work for people in an environment. It does function for them. And I really do think that it's because these cognitive sides that we've talked about before, there are different people who do different things in different ways. So what's funny about what you brought up is that there is a lot of societal things that tend to be brought up by media. Media tends to be created by very imaginative people, and imaginative people function differently than people who work off of knowledge, or people who work off of memory. So you get.
What do you think, Serene? What do
Yeah,
you think?
actually, I wanted to say this, which is that about the public education system, which is, as a parent, I agree that the public education is okay. Okay, I probably shouldn't say this, right? I live in a country where people will turn up at your door if you say something like this. Just kidding.
Oh my God.
But anyway, but why do I send my kid to a public school, even though I think it's garbage? Because he gets him out of my hair for 5 days a week. There is somewhere safe to put at that the government is paying for, and I pay peanuts for it. For somebody to basically eyeball him, for 5 days a week while I go to work.
I want to stop you there.
Is there anything else? Sorry, you want to say something, Tiffany?
I want to stop you there, Serene, because here's the thing. We are basing our reality on survival. It's like you can't see. I love what Kristen Sherry says. She writes a whole bunch of books, but one of the ones that I'm most fascinated in is UMAP, right? And UMAP certified coach, yes. So one of the things that I really like about what she said was you can't read the label from inside the jar. You can't read the label from inside the jar. And I think that's so critical. We don't know everything. We can't possibly know everything. We have to get community support. And I think this is talking about how do you create an effective system? Well, what does the science say, right? Science says that effective teams are between 5 plus or minus 2. And then it goes to say that when you look at ancient tribal wisdom, right? Let's go to look at what is it? Neanderthals or whatever. They operated in clumps of 150. So when you get these monstrous type organizations, are they set up in a way to create communities, for instance, that are around 150? And is that an effective way? Because then it brings into what Isaac said about bringing this lived experience, and then and everybody knows what everybody else is doing, right? Because 150, you kind of know what your people are doing. And then after that, you can breathe life into these shared experiences. This is where effective teaming comes in. And it's like, when you talk about changing the education system, are we really talking about how to affect equal opportunity amongst everyone? Are we stripping away really important bits when we move to, for instance, virtual learning? I'm just saying, right? This is just my perspective and the way I see it. But are we stripping away positive effects of teamwork and social interaction? Are we breathing life into a system that over time is not sustainable? And what is sustainable? What does sustainability look like? How do you create the conditions to affect the systemic change that's needed to move the world into a more positive light?
And that was the reason why I brought up education at all, was to sit back and say that there's a lot of media that put some of this stuff in a negative light. And the reason is because that's created by people who tend to be more imaginative, when there are probably more people who are, memory and knowledge base out there. So these systems are set up for them. And so they're not set up for the people who then tend to have a voice that contributes to this. And so this is kind of exactly what you're talking about. And my issue with the unschooling system as a whole is the fact that you're helping one person, which is great, but it doesn't help everyone at large, because you're right. You are leaving behind, you are throwing the baby out with the bathwater. You are leaving behind the good while trying to get rid of the bad, not recognizing that there is more out there than doing this stuff. And this kind of brings back around into the original topic, is there are systems in place that are designed to cater to a lot of people. You remove the cubicles, and that's hard for the introverts. But again, why were the cubicles removed in the first place? For other people. And that's definitely something to where, and going back to education, I've worked with people, and in the gaming industry, we use what's called a director AI. A director AI is a program that is able to identify real-time solutions and modify the game in particular ways. So a game called Left 4 Dead, it's a game that, is there's a lot of zombies coming at you.
It's okay. I think we don't have to go down the nerd rabbit hole. Yes.
Well, the reason why I bring it up is just because they're able to record different variables, and these variables are able to modulate artificially, but modulate what your stress levels are. And so these are the types of programs that are being developed. But fact is that psychologically, we're still really behind. And so I think that there are bosses out there who care, who are unable to do anything because the bulk of the people operate on a particular wavelength, but there are also bosses who don't care, who do a good job for their employees because their employees happen to fit the data that they have in order to maximize their productivity in a way that they still enjoy.
So let me say this, right? Since we are coming to the end, I mean, we're almost the end of discussion. I want to ask you this. If you say that this system, some of it is, some of it is bathwater, some of it is baby, which part of it would you consider to be the baby and which part would you consider the bathwater? If we needed to change the system, what are we really looking at? Which parts do we want changed? Tiffany?
I want to leave you with a question. And this is us for internal reflection, right? Me to you. Are your hands really tied? Or is it a fallacy that you live in? And once you realize that you're the one tying your own hands, what are you going to do now? That's
it. Isaac?
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't sure. She said, I want to leave you with a question. So I was like, oh, I don't know.
Okay, so we're going to leave, is it? I guess, I don't know. I would love to hear from our listeners today, right? Like, think about it, right? Are we really a part of the system? And I'm somebody who truly believes that we fall prey to fundamental attribution theory, right? A lot of the times, people's behavior change drastically according to the circumstances. And I really believe that if you set up the system to let psychopaths, succeed. I think I've quoted this like forever. The job with the highest percentage of psychopaths is CEO, right? If you set up the system where people who are psychopathic succeed, then what else do you expect of their behavior, right? So, but like what Tiffany says, right? For each of us individually, are we really that constrained? I mean, can we really say, oh, it was the system, what can we do, Well, so those of you who are listening as well, type it in. Tell us, are you really that constrained? And Isaac, how about you? I mean, okay, you were telling us all this time that you're a caring manager, right?
Well, I'm a very social person. So like I've got a McDonald's that I go to. And this McDonald's that I go to, nobody cares. Like, and I'm not talking about like management caring for CEO. I'm talking about the fact that these people barely talk to me, barely do anything with me. But I've worked at a lot of fast food restaurants, and being a much more social person, I have reached out and I've had conversations with people. And I'm not even going to say that I care about these people exactly because I've seen them once in my life. But at the same time, there are people out there who are more relational. But I'm going to take this from a very parental approach because I have spoken with a lot of children and parents in troublesome relationships with the other. And it really does come down to the fact that you get some parents who will operate on one side of the brain and kids who operate on the other side of the brain, and they don't know how to communicate with each other. And so I think that the leaps and strides that we're making in psychology are absolutely a huge help in understanding children and parents. And I think that exact same system is going to be put into the workplace over time to allow them to communicate more. But in the end, people do not, to go back to what Tiffany was saying, they are tying their own hands. And they're tying their own hands because they work on a different wavelength than other people. And these two wavelengths, they don't know how to communicate with each other very well. For me personally, I'm very good at, in a general sense, I'm not going to say for this conversation because I've definitely started over myself quite a bit, but in a general sense, I tend to believe that I'm relatively good at communication. I'm able to communicate with people on different sides of the spectrum, which has allowed me to bring people to understand things a lot better than they did before.
I'm glad we're knocking you off your game. I'm super glad. Because this is what this whole thing is about. It's getting you off balance. It's getting you off kilter. It's allowing you to think different because that's what we're finding. And the final thing is I like what you say here and about starting younger and this like parental educational standpoint, because what it keeps bringing to mind to me, I mean, like over and over, is what concepts are we socializing? And are we even conscious of the concepts that we're socializing that is literally impacting like the future generations to come?
Narratively speaking, you can so I'm a narrative designer, so I tend to bring things very much into story, and I bring things into story because again, this is something I said earlier, that story art in general is someone taking an emotion and wrapping it up for the audience and presenting it to them in a way that is digestible. So you and I don't have the same story, but we might have similar emotions, and through a fantasy we are able to experience those emotions with each other. Now, when you're creating a narrative, there are three aspects: the world, the character, and the story. And very much so, the way that story structure works is that you have the world that creates an environment that is uncomfortable for the character. The character makes their own decisions where they go forward and through their actions develop or find something that changes the way that the world operates. And I think that is the cyclical nature that we see in life. And so out of the billions of people that we have, only a select few really do this. And only a select few of those select few do it on a larger scale. And then trying to get other people who don't necessarily go off on these adventures, who are okay with the status quo, to be willing to change this type of stuff is a huge headache, to say the least, because they are comfortable with the status quo and where things are at. And so change takes time, because you have to wait for some people to bring a change. But at the same time, when I say a select few, if you just open up the internet, you say, hey, we've got issues with global warming. Oh, well, someone created a carbon eating concrete. Okay, we've got issues with kids in third world countries. Well, someone create a company where if you buy shoes, a pair of shoes is shipped off somewhere else. So you see all over the news that there are these people who are care for people that they don't even know. So the CEO of McDonald's probably does not care for the brand new low-level employee, but they're still very much supporting the Ronald McDonald House, which ensures that parents with sick kids have a place to go and be all the time. So, and again, that's why I try to define the terms of engagement beforehand, because there are people who care about strangers, there are people who care about the people next door, there are people who care about the lowest level employees, there are people who don't care at all. And finding the question gives us the answer.
Yes.
I think I lost my own track there.
It's okay, no problem. So I was just gonna summarize it. I think from what you just shared, I think communication, being able to communicate with your people, whether or not you care, to be able to communicate them, and to in that sense, I would actually put it as to be able to connect to them rather than just communicate. Because there's all kinds of employee communications going out, but I think the ability to connect to people, that is something that is important, and that will show care. Whether fundamentally that's something that will actually happen, we don't know, but certainly I think that there are elements in management that cares, and that we shouldn't kind of kill off management. There was an article we put out about how Google tried to kill off management and realized that it doesn't really work. Yes. Okay, so any final comments on this? What do you want to if you want to leave one sentence, what do you want to leave with our audience today?
How do we initiate big scale change? And if we only have a limited amount of time, and we all know that change takes time, and we all know that we care about different things, how do we collaborate and recruit and bring on the people that share our same virtues, so that we're able to move mountains, but that the mountains that are moved touches everyone, so that they feel seen, heard, understood, listened to, and they can initiate the types of impactful movements for good that this world needs. How do we initiate change?
Thank you very much, Tiffany. Isaac, one last thing you want to...
Yeah, since Tiffany has taken this very large scale approach, and I don't just want to completely copy her and be like, ooh, since I'm talking after her, I get to claim the statement. I'm going to take the opposite approach, and I'm going to sit back and I'm going to say, if you are in a position to where you are struggling, work first to understand yourself, because then when you understand yourself, you can then look around for an environment that best fits to you. And maybe that is developing a brand new career. Maybe that's just finding a different company. But start by understanding yourself, how you operate, how your brain functions, so that you can then, at least until change is enacted, put yourself in a better position for you where you are more comfortable because you are around people who can connect and relate to and have an easier time. You're right. It's not just about communication, but communication that does connect. So figure out about yourself in order to best put yourself in the best position.
Okay. So I think if I sum up what both of you have said, if you are in a place where you can initiate change, initiate change. If you are in a place where you don't feel you can initiate change, look for another environment. And if you can't do either, read Dilbert. So thank you very much to my two guests today, Isaac as well as Tiffany. Thank you very much for all of you who are listening in today. And next week, we'll come up with another argument that we'll talk to you about. All right. So thank you so much. And well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon.
Good day to you, sir.
Yes, good day. All right.